Vic Demain, head groundsman at Durham Cricket, joins me now on Turf Business TV. Vic, thanks for taking time out today. How you been faring? I'll ask the first question. I mean, have you dodged the COVID thing?
Yeah, great pleasure to be here, Martin. Yeah, fairly healthy. Managed to to avoid the COVID, and we've had a couple of team members go down with it. But yeah, in general, everything's pretty good.
Is it kind of quite tight protocols for you with what you're doing and keeping away from the team as much as possible?
Yeah, it's been fairly difficult at times. Trying to keep people distanced. We work in a very small area. We've got 5 members of the team, and so trying to keep those distances, trying to keep things clean, and trying to be as safe as we can is not always as easy as one would hope for. But so far, so good.
And I guess we're getting very close to season starting again. How are preparations going?
Yeah, it soon rushes round once we get past Christmas. Been fairly good this time. The weather's been really helpful over Christmas. Has been very mild. We've had not a great deal of rain, so we're able to get on the ground, which isn't always the case in Durham at this time of year. Starting to get a few really sharp frosts at the moment, but in general, yeah, everything's heading in the right direction.
Good stuff. And if we look at your big fixtures this year, what's the highlight that you're looking forward to on the calendar?
We've got a international ODI against South Africa, which is coming up in July. We've got a women's T20 international in September. First time I've had a women's international at the ground here. They did have one in 2014, but that was the year before me. So they would be the two standout fixtures at the moment.
And do you do anything different for those, or is it just business as usual?
It's funny, that's a question that I'm always asked. Are international pitches different to ordinary pitches? And it's a question that sort of, if anything ruffles my feathers, that's one of the ones that will, because everybody seems to think that you do more for an international pitch, but actually you end up doing less because there are so many more people around the ground with TV coverage and that sort of thing. You're not always allowed access to the ground that you would normally have. So, as I say, you probably do less for an international than you do for a county fixture.
But your philosophy is all matches are equal, all deserve the same quality of surface. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Whether it's an under 11s game, a ladies game, an international game, a village game, the pitch is treated exactly the same.
So let's move back a bit and talk about your kind of turf care journey. I think 26 years ago you started your first role after a bit of a spell as a painter and decorator. So first question is the normal one. Why turf care? What attracted you to it?
Well, it probably wasn't turf care that brought me into the industry. I mean, I've loved cricket all of my life. Played cricket not very well, at a lowly standard in my village club. I've done practically every job in the village club. But one thing that really fired me was cricket coaching. And I qualified as a cricket coach. And after things went wrong in the building trade for me, I wanted to get into cricket, but there weren't that many jobs around at that time. Well, I happened to see a job come up on a country estate, a private country estate, for a cricket ground manager. And part of that role was to look after the ground. Part of it was to do any coaching work there. And so I applied for that and didn't get it the first time I went there. And then after a year, got a call back to say that would I still be interested.
Wow, okay. And was that Rothschild?
It was Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, yeah, just on the edge of Buckinghamshire.
So was that all the budget you could want for, or were you still having to be kind of creative and use some skills?
It's funny, I've never had. I'm so envious of some of these guys. I've never felt that I've worked with a budget that I need to do the job. So everywhere I've worked has always been like my personal life. Actually, I mean, I know every penny personally, and I'm probably the tightest guy you're ever going to come and see. I'm never going to buy you a pint in the bar, so don't expect that. And I look after every penny that I can, but I've always thought, wouldn't it be great to work at, for example, somewhere like Wimbledon tennis, where there seems, I'm sure it's not the case, but there just seems to be a lot of money around.
So was that was a National Trust role, wasn't it? You're actually employed by the National Trust.
It was, yes, it was. It was through the National Trust, yeah.
And was it just looking after the cricket and the coaching, or was there anything else?
Just the cricket, purely cricket. I did occasionally help out with a bit of gardening, but the main role was just the cricket ground.
So you stayed there for 7 years. So you obviously enjoyed it, got the bug for cricket groundsmanship or turf care, whichever way you want to look at it. And then you went somewhere else that was a contractor company around about the Milton Keynes area. Why did you take that step, Vic?
Well, it was interesting, actually. I mean, talk about me learning groundsmanship. In working at the National Trust, I worked with a team of about 8 gardeners, and the lucky thing was none of them knew about making cricket pitches because I knew nothing about it when I went in. So I learned by getting down on my hands and knees and getting dirty and talking to local guys in clubs. And I was lucky enough to sort of get by. Then we had a change of estate manager, and I got made redundant when things were changed at the National Trust. What I've actually omitted to say to everybody, and this is probably the first time I've ever said this, is that I actually went to work for a school in between those 2 roles that you say, which was the Royal Grammar School at High Wycombe. And I very quickly realised that I'd hated school as a kid and nothing much had changed as an adult. Right. So I very quickly got out of that role, and then went on to contracting at MK.
And was that all cricket, or was that different types of surfaces?
That was cricket, probably 95%. In the winter, obviously, we had to go out and mark football pitches, things like that. But it was nearly all cricket.
So 2 years with them, and then you took a role at Uxbridge. First class cricket there, wasn't it? Was that the first time you got involved in first class cricket, or had you had some first class cricket when you were at the National Trust?
We'd actually had some. At the National Trust. We did have one game in my last season, 2003. Was the last year of the NatWest Trophy, when minor county sides used to play against first class counties. Yeah. We had a game, Buckinghamshire against Gloucestershire. That was, strictly speaking, that was what they call a List A game as opposed to first class. Right. But it was the first professional cricket that I'd been involved in. We also had minor counties cricket there, Buckinghamshire played. But then moving on to sports ground surfaces, under my great mate Richard Bryce, who ran the company, we were an outground for Northants County Cricket Club. Right. So we would get T20 matches, 50 over games. A lot of their second 11 games were played there. So I'd had that sort of introduction, but moving on to Uxbridge was when I really first got involved with county championship, tourist matches, and the sort of higher level games.
Did that mean you had to up your game, or did you come in it with the same kind of philosophy, shall we call it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always done everything the same. I'm one of those guys. Whatever I do, I try and do it to the very best of my ability. And whilst we're constantly learning, things are constantly changing, we're constantly trying different methods. I think I've always tried to do things pretty much exactly the same.
And with that role, you also had bowls, rugby, and I think tennis as well there, which were they 3 totally new surfaces for you to look after? And I guess they all have their own distinct profile and methodology that you kind of follow for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was invaluable to me because it taught me so much about turf care. And in cricket, we do everything that's wrong. We do everything that's wrong for grass. Um, so Bowling Green was fascinating. Fascinating. I've never been involved in bowls before. Didn't realise quite how much in work it takes to look after a bowling green and how much time it takes. It really is. It really is a great art. And being a sound construction was completely different for me because I've always worked on clay. Yeah. The tennis courts, I think, were in a way similar to cricket. Again, it's clay, it's not as heavy, but the work rate going into it is similar. And then winter sports with the rugby, well, that was something different again because working in different conditions, different weather conditions, we had drainage issues, massive drainage issues, which caused problems. Trying to mark white lines on puddles is not the easiest thing to do. So they were all challenges, but they were all invaluable to me. Work experiences giving me the chance to see the turf care industry from all sides, really.
So 7 years there, learnt a lot, and then there was a role at Trent Bridge that you moved to. So now we're talking Test cricket. Is that another step up? Is there any different pressure there? I mean, we think your philosophy is you still treat it the same, but are there more outside pressures?
Yeah, I think the main difference that Trent Bridge introduced to me was the not so much the pitches or the preparation of the grounds, but everything that goes on around international cricket. The media. The first season I was there, we had the opening match of the 2013 Ashes, and the build up to that was massive. Sky TV were there for a week before the game, doing all sorts of filming things, watching everything that you're doing. It was my first introduction to stump microphones. There being microphones underneath your nose every time that you're doing a pitch, and the things that you normally say to some of the other guys around you actually weren't going down. Well, there had to learn very quickly who to talk to and who not to talk to, and realise that you couldn't just have a chat the way that you and I are having a chat today, because some of the things that you say could easily be put out in the media later on. And I think as groundsmen, we probably aren't as prepared as we should be for that sort of eventuality. There's no real training to how you deal with the media, deal with the cameras, and sometimes you've got to be a little bit smarter than you normally are.
And I think over the last 10 years or so, social media has become a real place where anybody can express their opinion, whether they're coming from any kind of position of knowledge or understanding. Has that impacted you at all, or have you kind of ducked away from all of that?
Now that's been massive, and I'm although I only use Facebook personally. I don't use any of the other platforms. I have tried Twitter, but I no longer use it. Social media is not something that I enjoy. I see the benefits of social media. I see that we can educate people, or try and educate people a lot on what we're doing. But to me, there are so many negatives out there. You make a comment and someone wants to have a pop at you. Yeah. You try and help someone and somebody else wants to have a pop at you. And it's not just social media, it's industry forums. It can happen on as well. That was my first experience of it. But you approach it in one way where you're trying to be open to people, honest with people, and help people. The way that I learned in this industry was talking to the old boys. You go and talk to the old boys, and they give you so much help. But the thing that I've always found with groundsmanship is that 95% of the guys want to help one another. They're all there for you. Like with the 18 first class head groundsmen now, we have our own WhatsApp group, and if anybody's got an issue, most of them will pitch in and will try and help. But I find on social media there are so many people who want to have a pop at you, and this can be people who are nowhere near the game, people who are in other countries, for example, and straight away they see something. The pitch looks a little bit green. The first ball didn't bounce as much as you would expect, and within 10 seconds, social media's gone berserk. What I've always tried to do in that sort of situation is, when we're about a week away from an important match, I just take myself out of it. I don't look at it at all. And whereas all the guys who work with me, they're all sat on their phones all the time. They all know not to tell me anything about what's going on social media, even if it's good. I don't want to know, because I've seen it. I've seen that sort of thing destroy other people. I think mentally I'm fairly strong. I don't really get brought down by people making negative comments, but I don't really want to see them. And that's the same with the media as well. I won't read newspapers. I won't read the online reports of games until, and if the match is on the television, I won't watch highlights or anything like that until about a week after the game's finished, because I just want to be in my own bubble.
I guess it could influence you as well if you're getting a lot of chatter about something that you believe is right, and you might be getting, I don't know, ex-England captains saying, oh, a bit worried about X, Y, Z, which they've done in the past, not necessarily to you, but to some of your peers. If you keep yourself away from it, you can't be influenced by it, can you? And you do the job the way that you know is right.
Yeah, I mean that is absolutely my thinking. Is that I don't need to know what they're thinking. I'm strong enough in my own ability to know that. I mean, I know cricket, and I sit and watch every ball of every game, and the person that I need to please is myself. If I can walk away at the end of the day and think, yeah, I've done a decent job there, I've done as much as I can, I'm happy. It may be that other people involved in the game are thinking that it wasn't the way that I'm thinking, but I need to please myself more than I need to please other people.
And I guess you're trying to please the home team, whether that's an international team or the county that's playing. I guess certainly when you get to longer format games, you've got to keep the club directors happy, because they want 4 full days or 5 full days if it's a test match of drinks and tickets being sold. Yeah, and that's all got to be a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, I do believe in home advantage. I think in any sport there should be a home advantage, but, and for me it's a big but, I think there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. To me, you produce the best pitch that you probably can for a game. That should be the ideal. And if you're not producing the best pitch, you're laying yourself open to abuse. I think you produce the best pitch that you can, and the two sides then play on it, and the side that plays the best will win. I firmly believe, and I'm sure it's going to come back and haunt me at some stage, is that if you have to cheat to win at sport, there's something wrong. I don't believe in cheating. I've been very lucky in my time at Durham, in that for a long time I worked under the captain Paul Collingwood, and Paul always said to me, "You just produce the best pitch that you can, and I will back my players to play on it."
I guess that's all you can ask for, isn't it?
I think that's the ultimate, yeah. But unfortunately, in this day and age, um, every county wants to win. Every county wants to win the league. Every county wants to win promotion or avoid relegation. The higher you finish in the league, probably the more prize money you're going to get. So you need to finish as high as you can. And I'm afraid that there are certain individuals who will do everything in their powers to achieve that. And I've been lucky in that I've never been placed in that sort of position whereby I'm being asked to do something which I don't necessarily agree with.
Just before we move on to you moving on to Durham, which was a couple of years after you started at Trent Bridge, betting. There's been a few scandals around that down the years. Has that, when we're talking about pressure, has that put you and your team under any extra scrutiny, or is that just something completely off of your radar?
It certainly never put me under any pressure because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the tightest guy going, and so I never bet. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't.
I wasn't looking at it that way. I was more looking whether you have to go through any kind of
Sure,
procedures
yeah,
to make sure
no,
you're
sure.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just we are not allowed to bet on cricket, and I think the same is true in football. The football guys are not allowed to bet on football. If you did and you got caught doing it, you'd probably lose your position. So we don't bet on cricket at all. But again, I mean, it comes back to the social media thing as well. You're asked questions. You're asked certain questions by people who, I mean, I've always been the sort of person that believes everybody that talks to me. But there are some quite nasty people out there who are seeking to take advantage. And we always used to get people come out to us and say, "Oh, how's things today in a T20 game? What do you think the score will be today? How many do you think we need to win the game?" And I mean, I was just accepted that they were fans of the team that I was working for, and you'd say something like, "Well, I think 180 would be a decent score." Now you don't do that. You say, "Well, the pitch looks okay, the weather's fine. Hopefully, we'll have a good game."
It's a sad reflection, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, everywhere you look now, through social media or people chatting to you, they're looking for a little angle. And when betting's involved, you've got to be so careful, I guess, yeah? And I think there's probably no other turf care role that can have such a direct impact on the result of a game. In fact, certainly, I think, as a cricket groundsman. So I wondered if there were extra kind of hoops that you had to jump through to prove that you weren't, getting nobbled.
No, I think you just have to realise that there are people watching. There are the ECB itself has its own branch of corruption and what have you, and people will look for patterns and people will look for things going on, and so you just got to be aware of that sort of thing. Personally, for me, betting's never really been an issue. I think probably what many of us don't understand. I mean, we always used to think of betting as you put a bet on a horse and you bet on who's going to win. But nowadays, people bet on how many times the umpire's going to scratch his nose, and I mean, it's ridiculous what people bet on, and that's also something that I would never have thought of, I must admit.
Let's talk about Durham then. So 2 years at Trent Bridge, and there is a pattern. There's 7 years, 2 years, 7 years, 2 years. And now you spent 7 years, I think, at Durham, haven't you?
Well, this is my 8th year coming up, hopefully.
Is it? Oh, right, okay.
Unless someone tells me differently before April.
So when you joined, again, it was a test venue. So why did you move on from Trent Bridge to Durham? Was it purely and simply, head groundsman role?
Yeah, I loved my time at Trent Bridge. It opened my eyes to so much. I mean, you can't believe, for me, a cricket lover, the amount of people, my heroes, that it exposed me to at that time. And I used to just love a Sunday morning, 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning at Trent Bridge, going into that ground with nobody in the ground and just looking around, and you could feel the history. You could feel the history of that ground, and it taken me into another level. But whilst I loved my time there, I was deputy head groundsman, and I'm someone that always needs a challenge. I've always wanted that challenge. Like, if we had a test match at Trent Bridge and it went wrong, that was Steve Burke's problem. It wasn't mine. I could hide behind him. Nobody came knocking on my door. And I felt possibly that was where I wanted to be. So the chance, I'd at places like Uxbridge, I'd done 2-week festivals whereby you produce 3 or 4 pitches, but could I do that over the entirety of the season? Could I do that with the different demands of the day in, day out, everyday job? And that's where I wanted to test myself at. The other big thing for me was I knew that in 2016, Durham had an England Test match at the Riverside, and by this stage, I'd practically got every other T-shirt as far as cricket grounds went. And again, I wanted to test myself at that level.
So you had a year to prepare for that. And I'll just say that again. So you had a year to prepare for that test match. Did it live up to your expectations when you finally were head groundsman of your first test match?
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, it was that challenge that I expected it was going to be. We were blessed with decent weather. We played against Sri Lanka, and unfortunately they got rolled over the test match before at Headingley. They seemed to be a side in transition and looked to be a very poor side. England were reasonably strong, and I think Sri Lanka, I think, batted first and got out for a very low total, just over 100. England then rocked up 400. Right. You thought the game was going to be over in 3 days, and that wouldn't have been good for us. But Sri Lanka actually fought back in their second innings, and they scored over 400 and played very well, made England work. Probably because of the fact that the pitch was so flat, nothing was ever going to happen. But England got the win on the fourth day, I think, and everybody seemed reasonably pleased with it. And I felt I could walk away fairly happy with what had happened.
So at that point, would that have been your career highlight?
At that point, yeah. At that point, certain things have happened since which have probably gone above that, which I never thought was going to be the case. But at that point, yes, that was what I wanted to do. And
well, we'll come on to that in a second then. With the test match, unfortunately, you haven't had one since, have you? But that's nothing down to what you did with the pitch. The club kind of lost its status through kind of administrative issues, should we say, financing kind of things.
Yeah, unfortunately, the club had test match status taken away and we were relegated from Division 1. I think that was the end of that 2016 season, actually, for financial issues that had gone on in the past. We haven't had a test match since, which is a bit of a shame, but then I've done one, so I'm more fortunate than some of the guys that have been around for 20 years or so. I have actually done a test match. Do I need to do another one? It'd be nice, yeah, but let's face it.
Ashes one would be nice, wouldn't it?
Ashes one went well, and they had one up here in Durham. I think that was in 2013. And still talk about it now, and that would be great to do another Ashes test. Obviously, I did the one at Trent Bridge as deputy. But you see, the thing is, Martin, doing another test match, it could all go horribly wrong. Yeah. And you're only remembered by your last game. So
well, 100% record, get out on top, Vic, eh? So 7 years in the role. Do you think you've changed?
Yeah, I've changed. I proved to myself that I could do it day in, day out. I'm pretty comfortable with myself now. I'm really comfortable with the team of guys that I've got around me working. I've probably relaxed a little bit from when I first came in. I've always been one of those sort of guys who needs to take responsibility for everything, and I'm not great at delegation, things like that. Where I think now I'm a little bit more chilled out, and I'm prepared to let some of the other guys get on and do the work.
So, challenges. You know, all throughout your career, it seems to have been a progression and a step forward, a step up. Yeah. Through that 26 years or so, what's the biggest challenge that you've faced personally, and and how did you overcome it?
I think probably the biggest challenge that I've had has been here at Durham. The ground, Durham has always been known as a bowler friendly ground. Batsmen can struggle here, and bowlers can dominate games, and a lot of that is down to the makeup of the ground. There's nothing much that can be done. I mean, we're right next to the River Wear, and I was fortunate enough to talk to the guy who actually made this ground, dear old Tommy Flintoff, who was head groundsman here, who unfortunately passed away a year or so ago, 18 months ago. But I was fortunate enough to pick Tom's brains before he disappeared, and he told me that there was as much water underneath our square as there is in the River Wear. And it certainly explained a few things to me why I could never dry pitches out properly and ground movement. But one of the things that happened, particularly in 2018, was that our levels on our square had got so bad. We had a particularly wet winter that we had water standing over the entire square for the whole of the winter of 2018. And it just highlighted some of the problems that we had. And thankfully, the club backed me in that we made a decision to strip the top of the square off to some depth and to introduce new soils, get falls along the length of the pitches as well as across the pitches to get that standing water off and improve the levels. And I remember talking to a top groundsman at the time about it just before we started, and he said, "Well, look, you've got two options here, Vic. You either carry on the way you are. The pitches haven't been too bad. You've been getting reasonable marks for them, and nothing's gone horribly wrong. So you either leave it as it is now. You're getting on a bit. You haven't got too long to go, so you can sail off into the sunset and leave it to somebody else, or you can do the work now in the knowledge that the following season the pitches aren't going to be very good, because they never are when you've put that much fresh soil on there, and hope that they get better in the future." And for me, that wasn't really an option. I'm not going to just walk away. I want to leave whenever I choose to leave or whenever I'm asked to leave. I'm hoping to leave it in a better position than I feel it was in when I came into it. And so not doing that work wasn't an option to me. I was prepared to know that the pitches wouldn't be at their best the year after, in the hope that season on season they are now going to improve.
And I assume that the club understood and backed you with that.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, financially and with support.
Okay. We touched on career highlights earlier, and up until 2016, I think it was the Test match that you had at Durham. But you mentioned that maybe something else has happened since. Would it be the reconstruction, or would it be something else?
The reconstruction is very important, but that hasn't reached its full potential yet. Hopefully, this coming season or the following season, it will, and then I'll be pleased with that if that happens. From a playing point of view, we had 3 World Cup games in 2019, including England's final group game against New Zealand, which when we got the fixtures, it was always a bit of a worry because I knew it was going to be England's final group game. Let's say we go into that match exactly as happened. Both sides could qualify, but if one side lost, they could go out of the competition. The thought was in my mind, well, if they come to Durham and England lose that game and they go out of the World Cup, I could be in for a little bit of stick, particularly on social media and other platforms. But we were blessed throughout the 3 games. Some of the other grounds earlier on in the competition had really bad weather, and the guys had worked so hard and games were being called off, and it must have been soul destroying for them. But we had 3 beautiful days for our matches. The first game, I think we had Sri Lanka. We're playing against South Africa, and Sri Lanka lost a wicket off the first ball of the game, and it looked as if the ball popped off a length. And I thought, oh, Christ, what's happened here? But on replay, the batsman clearly lost the ball and didn't see what happened. And it was a very one-sided game. South Africa won easily. But in each of the 3 games that we had an incident. And in that game, we were attacked by a swarm of bees. And all of a sudden, the guys all of them just hit the deck. And for about 30 seconds, whilst these bees went over. And luckily, apparently, that had happened in a game in South Africa the year before. So all the players knew what to do. So that game happened. Then we had a brilliant game. West Indies played Sri Lanka in the next game. Both sides scored over 300. West Indies should have chased the runs down, but they had a silly run out and fouled just a few short. But we were blessed.
Excuse me. Sorry, I've been trying to hold that in.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, carry on. Sorry about that.
We were blessed with a visit from the singer Rihanna, who came to the Riverside and was up in a box there, and it probably caused more exposure for our ground than any of the cricket had ever done. And social media was alive with it and what have you. So it's one of the good points of social media. And then obviously we had that final game, England against New Zealand, where Johnny Bairstow scored a great 100. He always scores 100 when he comes here. I don't know. I think England should probably play all of their games here. But much as it didn't go down too well with some of our security people and the television, maybe, we had a streaker as well. A streaker who came out, and he was a rugby player, so you can imagine the build of the guy, and six stewards hung on to him, trying to get him off the ground. At one point, he just dipped his shoulder and away he went again, and the crowd were loving it. So we had incidents in every game, and it was just a highlight. It was the World Cup was brilliant.
And then obviously, history was made.
History was made, yeah. And England went on and won that game, won the World Cup, and yeah, everything was great. I mean, you ask about personal highlights. The other thing that I should probably add in there is in 2017 we went down to Soltex to what was then the IOG's their 2-day event at Soltex, and we went to their presentation dinner on the evening, and we at Durham were up for the team of the year award, which we thought we had a decent chance of winning, which we did. But then the winner of each of the professional sports goes into like, dare I say, a playoff for the groundsman of the year, which suddenly my name come up on the screen and I wasn't even listening to it because I thought, well, there's no chance of that. That'll go to a football groundsman or something like that. And my name was up on the screen, and my deputy was nudging me and saying, "You've got to go up and get the cup." And it was just to be recognised by my peers within the game and across other sports. When I came back with the trophy and sat down to my table, and I looked at the other names that were on that trophy, people like head groundsman at Old Trafford, Manchester United, Old Trafford, and Wimbledon tennis and things like that, and my name was going to go on there as well. I just couldn't believe that. So from a personal sort of thing, recognition from the industry, that for me was massive.
I mean, personal highlight for you. You talk about those peers and the other names are on that trophy. Who's had the biggest influence on your career?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult question. I mean, there are so many people. But do you know, honestly, the people that have had the biggest influence for me are not the high profile groundsmen. It's the old boy back in the club grounds who helped me so much when I was starting out. There was a guy at my own club in Oxfordshire, Channel and Children in Oxfordshire, a guy called John Pilcher, who was a groundsman there. Not a typical groundsman. He ran his own business very successfully and did the ground on sort of a part-time basis. He taught me that our job is to put cricket on, it's not to call it off. And then when I went to Ascot Park to work for Rothschilds, guy just down the road at Long Marston Cricket Club, a guy called Don Winfield, who was your typical old groundsman. Get off my ground, you're not playing on my grass. But Don was a lovely chap, really. He taught me so much. As I say, when I went in there, I was a coach. I knew nothing about making pitches. But talking to him and his old mate Frank Walcott, who was the Aylesbury head groundsman, those guys, they loved one another. They were the best of friends, but they were also the biggest enemies. Whatever one did, the other one not, and it was a rivalry. But those sort of guys, when I went to Uxbridge in 2008, I had a young guy come over from New Zealand, guy called Simon Harvey, who came over and helped me for a season then, and we've stayed very close. He was the most knowledgeable groundsman that I'd ever worked with, and probably still is. And yet at the time he was 20 years old, and he was a kid, and he's been so helpful to me. And I think it's those sort of guys that have helped me no end, and the guys that I will always be thankful to.
So, 26 years ago when you started, how do you view what the industry's like now today compared to that?
I think the industry's changed massively, but in many ways it's still the same. We're still trying to do exactly the same thing. We're still trying to produce the best we can, something that looks presentable, whether it be on the television or whether it be for the person who comes in to watch the village match, whatever. You're trying to make everything look the best it can, play the best it can for the end users. I don't think the people have changed at all. Obviously, what's changed is the equipment that we have to work with. The machinery is so much better. I think of my old days pushing along hand scarifiers at the end of the season to try and clean pitches out, and silly little 2 foot wide rollover aerators to do things, and the days when you'd stand on weeks on end where you'd stand on the square with a garden fork and try and punch holes into it. I think now we have the equipment. Does it make the job easier? Yes, it certainly does. Does it make the job better? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it does. I'm sure some of this equipment obviously does. You clean pitches out a lot better with things like gradins and tractor mounted scarifiers than ever we did with our push along machines. But in many ways, the people are still the same. You'll find in groundsmen, and I guess it's the same in any industry. You have people that have that desire, and whatever equipment they have at their available to them, they're going to do the best they can anyway.
Do you have a piece of kit that you think's had the biggest impact on helping you do your job?
The piece of equipment I've always gone back to, Martin, is the Sysis Lawnman, which is no longer available. It's been superseded with the Sysis Combi Rake. But I'm fortunate. I've still got two push along lawnmans in the shed, which during the season I use daily. And for me, that's been the biggest thing. But I think that the one piece of equipment that was massively different for me when I went to Treadbridge was the hover cover. I think every professional ground in the country should have a hover cover. And it was my big aim when I came to Durham. I wanted to encourage the management to get me a hover cover.
How long did it take you?
It hasn't. I'm still not there yet.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still. That's a work in progress.
Okay. Well, we wish you luck with that one, Vic.
Yeah, I think it may be after my time.
So, apart from you getting a hover cover, what do you think is the one thing that would have the biggest impact on your industry, whether that's cricket or turf care as a whole?
I think we're at a major crossroads at the moment. The thing that we're hearing, kids today are very different to kids who were back in my day. Kids today want to be bloggers. They want to be YouTubers. They're not worried about getting out on the ground. That's not very sexy, and they don't want to do that. So I think we as an industry, we need to refocus and look at the way that what we're offering to kids is better. I talk to my lads that work here, and one of the biggest things will be work-life balance, the amount of hours that we work in the summer. Friday night, we'll have T20 games on a Friday night. All of their mates are down the pub with their girlfriends or whatever. They're stuck at work at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, having been there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. They're working practically every weekend. If it's not a cricket match, it's practice. There's always something going on. So we have to look at work-life balance, whether that means we need bigger staffs to allow people to have more time off. Something needs to be done there. And I think probably the other thing is the wage, particularly for starters. It's far easier now for young men and young women to go and work at Aldi or other supermarkets, work for Amazon, and earn a far better living than they can in our game, and they know the hours that they're gonna work.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and how you solve that one will come down to how it's funded, I guess. And that's a case of maybe efficiencies and making a case to the people above you that makes financial sense, that perhaps it's a false economy to keep paying so low wages, because you keep losing people that could become quite skillful and a real asset, and maybe make savings in other areas because you haven't had to do XYZ or retraining, etc.
Yeah, I mean it's not attractive at the moment. It's not attractive. It's not an attractive package that you're trying to sell. I think cricket probably is different to some of the sports in that there isn't the money there available. But I mean, I don't know what the position is in football. I don't know what groundsmen in football earn. But when you listen to the sums that are being spoken about in terms of transfer fees and costs in football, what people are being paid, surely there has to be some money floating around that could be directed towards the young kids coming into the industry and trying to make that more attractive. I mean, for me, what would be a greater incentive to get a job than the chance to go and sit in Anfield when it's a packed stadium. I don't know how many they get in there, but 40, 60,000, whatever, a full house on a Champions League night, the likes of Messi playing or Ronaldo playing and people like this. As a kid, I mean, I'd die for that to be put into that situation. But if you're only going to get 18,000 out of it, is it that attractive?
It's difficult, and I know football are not finding it easy to attract people either, even at the top end. So it's a problem across turf care.
Across the board, definitely.
Yeah. You've mentioned earlier on that you're an ambitious man and you've always progressed. Okay, at some point you might have to hang up the hat or the trowel or the pitchfork, whatever it is. Do you still have ambitions, or do you have an idea of what you might want to do with the rest of your career?
I want Carl McDermott's job.
Okay, that's serious, yeah?
That's absolutely serious, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
mean, that
you'd
was
like to
always,
run...
that was always the aim. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to watch Carl McDermott's back for him, do we?
He needs to watch his back.
Do you think that's likely?
Sorry, I didn't catch that, Martin.
Do you think that's a realistic proposition, or is that kind of just, if it was there, you'd grab it?
Obviously,
yeah?
that's pie in the sky. That's
Yeah.
never going to happen. There's probably about 17 other people ahead of me, if not a hell of a lot more. But you've always got to have a goal, haven't you? You've always got to have a dream. Who knows? I've always said I'm going to get knocked over by a double-decker bus somewhere. So who knows how far away that bus is at the moment? And as long as I wake up every morning, I've got to have a goal, something to look forward to. I mean, we're here in middle January. April isn't that far away, and that's the big goal at the moment, is that we can get another season going, and hopefully everything goes well this coming season.
Are you a guy, Vic, that looks forward to retirement and has a plan, or is it a kind of I'm here until I can't do the job?
No, I've never looked forward to retirement. I have no plan for retirement at the moment. I mean, I'm just 63 now, so it's probably time that I should be looking at winding down a little bit. But my view is, as long as my health is good, as long as I can do the job, as long as I'm still producing things to the best of my ability, and I'm pleasing myself at the end of the day, that I will continue to do so. I think the time will come whereby, if I'm not able to pull the covers on and off in the morning, if I'm not able to lift the bags around, if I'm not able to do my work, then I'm not going to be doing myself any sort of justice. So, and my view has always been that I will never ask somebody to do anything that I can't do myself. And at that point, I guess I will have to sail away into the sunset. But even then, if the house there, I couldn't sit in a chair in front of the TV watching Homes Under the Hammer every day. I'd need to go out and volunteer in a local park or something, or find some old cricket club that needs an old duffer to sit on the roller, or do whatever. I've no plans for going anywhere at the moment.
Okay. When you do move on from Durham, how do you want to leave it? What do you want your legacy may be too strong a word, but how do you want people to view your time there?
I'd like to think that given the work that we've done on the square and whatever, I'd like people to think that the pitches are playing a little bit better than they did in 2015 when I first came here. And I mean, I'd love to hear of batsmen being able to say that they feel settled at Durham, rather than they don't know what the next ball's going to do. It would be great if Durham were to be able to win a trophy before I left, and I could feel in some way that I'd help towards that sort of eventuality. But I don't know as I've any great legacy that I want to leave. I just want people to think, well, yeah, he did an okay job and didn't do too bad a job and didn't upset too many people.
Well, I think it's a bit more than okay, Vic, from all I've heard, and certainly your career path would justify that feeling as well.
I've been very lucky, Martin. I mean, I believe that things happen for a reason. I believe you do make your own luck, but there's no doubt that sometimes I've been in the right place at the right time, and I certainly wouldn't have got to the position I'm in now if back in 2012, I don't know if you remember, we had a horrendous summer. It never stopped raining. It was the year when we had a hosepipe ban, and it never stopped raining all year. But one of the games that we had at Uxbridge was Middlesex against Nottinghamshire, and true to word, it rained all the way through the game, but we managed to do a lot of work and we got quite a bit of cricket on. We didn't get a result, but we got quite a bit of cricket on. And I believe that when Nottinghamshire were looking for a deputy head groundsman the following season, and I sent my CV in, I'm told that the director of cricket then said, well, that's the guy that I want, because he worked his socks off for us when we went down to Uxbridge. And without that bit of luck of having the right fixture at the right time, I wouldn't be where I am now. So just keep plodding on.
Vic, it's always a joy to speak to you. You remain one of the more positive guys in the industry, I think, and you've got a great outlook. I hope to see you real soon, and we wish you best of luck for the coming season.
Come up and see us at Durham sometime, Martin. It'd be a pleasure to have you up here.
Would love to.
Great stuff.